Hi, gang. Ryan Peterson here. Joining me, as always, Brian Houston. Ryan and Brian talking sports. This episode will be posted for Tuesday, October 6th. And Brian, you were already fired up. You were texting me Sunday night. When do you want to do this? Because you had a lot to say, a lot to get to with college football, the NFL, even the NBA finals with Jimmy Butler, TJC Apache in the big game. But we have to start with the Cowboys. And before I say anything, just take the floor because I want to hear this rant.
I tweeted out yesterday at about halftime when they were down, 41-14. And the first thing that I said was that, okay, new coaching staff, no OTAs, no fall. You're 4 weeks into the season. That excuse is off the table. All right. You've had time now. That is the sloppiest, most undisciplined football team I think I've ever seen in Dallas. The defense is absolutely atrocious. And I got to tell you, man, I am not at all impressed with the coaching right now. And it's not because they're getting beat, but it's because of some of the personnel decisions that they continue to make. Like putting that rookie free agent Street on Myles Garrett with no help, nothing from a tight end or a running back chipping, putting him out there on an island with this beast and then getting his quarterback killed when everybody knows that Street is not an NFL tackle. The other one is putting Darryl Worley one-on-one with Odell Beckham Jr., and having him try to take the outside away. So what does Beckham do all day long? He runs slants and posts over the middle and torches this guy all day. And you know who played the most snaps in the ball game? Darryl Worley.
Are you serious?
He played the most snaps of any Cowboy in the ball game yesterday. And so they just repeatedly put him out there, no safety help. I mean, what in the hell is going on in Dallas? This guy's a Super Bowl coach. What is going on? Okay, that's just a start. I'll let you have the floor now for a while.
So the funny thing is, I feel like watching this team this year, I feel like McCarthy is coaching and playing with this team like I would play on Madden. And by that, I mean a few things. Number one, you're always going for two. You go for fourth down. You do fake punts. I'm talking about the whole totality of the last four games. And you're pass happy. Like you just want to pass it all the time. It's like you're playing a video game where you just want to throw because it's fun. And what we are seeing here, Brian, is that this team is not built to be able to. You had mentioned the offensive line. This is not the same old offensive line. Dak threw for 500 yards. What does it matter? Like, who cares? I mean, all of it, so much of it was in garbage time. And if it wasn't for a miracle onside kick against Atlanta, they're looking at 0-4, giving up all these points. To me, they have to get back to more ball control. It was kind of like when we were calling the White House game on Friday night, Brian, and you were talking about White House wanting to keep Roy City off the field. The Cowboys, but White House actually has a defense. I think White House's defense is better than the Cowboys' defense. The Cowboys' defense can't stop anything, and yet you're going out there. They were running tempo. That's great if you're going to score every single possession, but this Cowboys team continues to be undisciplined. They'll have fumbles at inopportune times. They'll randomly have a 3-and-out, and the problem is when you play offense like they do with that defense, there's no margin for error. I mean, there's none because you get behind 2 or 3 possessions that just start snowballing, which we saw yesterday. And I think the biggest thing. And look, I'm not saying CeeDee Lamb isn't amazing. He's a great player. He looks like, he could even be Rookie of the Year this year. But when they drafted CeeDee Lamb, my first response was they don't need him. they have a lot of talented receivers. They have all these other areas of need from offensive line to defense, but it was the splashy draft pick, even though they had just given Amari Cooper $20+ million a year. Gallup was coming in. Everyone thought he was coming into his own to being a good receiver. They have a good quarterback that can make average receivers look better, but it's all about splashy moves. And what we are seeing is it's a team that doesn't have a defense at all. And the offense is basically, I mean, they've just turned into we're going to throw, and it's not going to work right now.
I will argue one point on there. You mentioned them being pass happy, and I know that's McCarthy's MO. He was kind of pass happy with Green Bay, but he never had a running back like Zeke. What I would argue is that they have to scrap their game plan before the first quarter is over. I mean, in every ball game, they've been down at least 2 touchdowns. Even in the Atlanta game, they were down 20-21, 20-0 at the end of the first quarter. So eventually, all you can do is throw, because you're playing from so far behind all the way through. They may still throw it a lot. The second thing is Zeke, I don't know what's going on with him, but suddenly, it's a fumble every week. And yesterday he looks like he gave up on the play. He might have thought he was down when he landed on the player, but he gave up on the play and got the ball punched out. Dak got hit. This was the fumble that Dak had is a direct result of Steele not being able to protect, because Dak had his arm back to throw and he got hit from the blind side by Myles Garrett, who whipped Steele like a rented mule. So the one turnover, the late interception, that was a killer. But the defense, I mean, listen, 307 yards rushing. And we're talking about Nick Chubb going out of the ball game with a knee injury in the first quarter. So not only did Chubb have a huge day against him, running back number 2 had a great game against him. Running back number 3 had a great game against him. I could have run for 40 against that bunch yesterday, the way the Cleveland offensive line was just mauling Dallas's front. So 307 yards, and then we're watching the game, them talking about this Dallas defense being on pace to be the worst defense since the 1960 expansion team. The first year, when all you've got is trash.
Yeah.
So it's I don't know if I don't know how you fix this. The idea that because they play in the NFC East, it's a terrible division, and so the odds makers still say the Cowboys have a better chance of winning their division than the Seahawks have of winning theirs. Well, I dismiss that now after watching the Eagles. At least the Eagles on Sunday night showed they've got some semblance of a defense when they beat the 49ers. They tackle. They hit people. There's effort issues with the Cowboys. There's people out of position. There's terrible tackling. It's a disaster. The roster is a disaster. The plan is a disaster. At what point does Mike Nolan start trying to do something to cover up some of these guys instead of throwing Darryl Worley out there and letting him get torched by, maybe the most explosive receiver in the league when he feels like it?
Well, and then there were already people in the media, not just TikTok fans, questioning, do you have to fire Mike Nolan now? Is this something where you're just like, look, this isn't working? I mean, you're on a historic, like, this isn't just like bad defense. This is like historically bad. They've given up 38+ points their last 3 games, and
minus 7 turnovers.
Yeah. And, I was going back and looking because you were saying Zeke doesn't look the same. He did have that big fumble, but that was on a 24-yard run that he fumbled it. The drive before, they also fumbled, but Zeke had run the ball well, and then Dak fumbled the ball after getting sacked. So I still feel like they need to run the ball more. Zeke has to have more than 12 carries. I know they got into a hole there, but they were still only down 2 touchdowns. I think that because the offense still ended up having to punt, even when they started throwing there at the end of the second half. And then we're seeing it's just, they get into a rhythm in the second half when they're down 4 touchdowns, and they start compiling some crazy stats and everything. But I don't know. They've got to keep the offense on the field more. They need to be more ball control. One other thing too, two things. One, I know some crazy people are going to blame Dak for this. If this team doesn't have Dak Prescott, and I feel like we've been saying this for 4 weeks now, if they don't have Dak Prescott, oh my gosh, they may be getting the number 1 pick. So,
and you don't want him having to drop back 61 times in a game. You don't want any quarterback doing that.
No.
But the fact is, the guy was making some incredible throws.
Oh yeah, and he's making himself more like right now. And it's funny. I want to get to this after. I want to bring up one more point, and then I want to get back to Dak because I wanted to compare it to what's going on in Houston with Deshaun Watson. But I don't have any emotional attachment to this, so I still think the Cowboys are the best team in that division, even with that horrendous defense right now, because I still think they could win all 6 of their division games. The Eagles won yesterday, but they were playing second and third string quarterbacks from the 49ers, and I don't think the Eagles can keep up. Even as bad as this defense is, I don't think the Eagles can keep up with the Cowboys, and I think the Cowboys will still get to 8-9 wins and win that division, even though they're 1-3. So, yes, things aren't good. They still 12 more games, and I do think they'll get it figured out because of the division, not because that says a whole lot about their division as much as it says about them.
Well, all I know is, and they may win their division, but that's a bad football team. That is just
right. But absolutely, that's a bad football team with a really talented quarterback that's having to do a heck of a lot.
And one last thing.
Yeah.
Again, we go back to coaching. How many more botched kickoff returns do we have to watch Tony Pollard do before they finally make a change there? Put CD Lamb back there. What in the hell is going on? I mean, really? I mean, so yes. All right. Anything else in the NFL strike you? Anything stand out? I kind of checked out after.
So a couple things, but one, I want to stay in Texas. So the Houston Texans are 0-4. I honestly don't think it's that big of a deal because looking at their schedule, I actually predicted them to be 1-3 or 0-4 because their first 4 games I thought they were playing better teams. But what I do find interesting, Deshaun Watson, and I think going into this season, most people always rank Watson ahead of Dak. And I don't think you can do that right now. Deshaun was horrible in the first half yesterday. He ended up having a better second half. And, I don't think Bill O'Brien's done a good job, and the Texans have just struggled, period. But Deshaun Watson got a huge deal. Not quite Patrick Mahomes money, but he got big money. And I like Deshaun Watson. I'm not trying to knock him, but what I am saying is Dak is playing better at a higher level, has been doing it for a few years now, and they still haven't paid him. So, I think right now, that's why I was saying Dak is making himself more money because if I'm Dak, I'm saying, look what these guys are doing that have been paid, and look what you've put on my shoulders. Look what I have to do every single week. I'm having to throw it 60 times for us to even be in the game. He nearly – if they stop the Browns on that drive that Odell Beckham ends up scoring a touchdown, the Cowboys might actually win that game, Brian. I think we're all just like, yeah, Dak's going to figure it out. That's how good he is. So I do think other teams, other players are proving how good Dak is.
Well, the one encouraging thing coming out of this thing is that, 41-14, you could lay down and die. Okay. So to the Cowboys' credit, to Dak's credit, he refused to let them lay down and die, and they kept coming back. Whatever, playing against prevent defense, whatever, they kept firing. And he still kind of reminds me, from a leadership standpoint and a refuse to lose standpoint, he still reminds me of Staubach. I grew up watching Roger Staubach, and the game was never over as long as the ball was in his hands. And so from that standpoint, that was one thing to come away from the game being very encouraged. Now, the question is, if you're Dak Prescott, and this S show that they got going on in Dallas right now, do you really want to stay? Do you want to go someplace else? Now, I don't know that he can go anywhere else and get anything better, but I'm just saying that I do believe the guy is maybe not top 5, but definitely top 10. And I think you can win games with him. It's been proven. His record shows that. But they just can't keep asking him to come, bring teams back from 4 touchdowns. And again, you can't ask somebody to score 50 points every week to have a chance to win a ball game. It's a mess. It is an absolute mess. The only other thing I want to talk about, not so much about pro football games, is just the fact that now we're starting to see COVID start to really affect what's going on in the league. Tennessee's been hit hard. A lot of players that have tested positive. They had to postpone the Patriots-Chiefs game to Monday night. And Cam Newton out because of COVID-19, which is huge. Deal. So, it's a reminder every time we want to let our guard down and start thinking about, okay, maybe life is getting back to some kind of normal. Then we see this hit, and you start seeing games having to be postponed, some having to be pushed down the road 3 or 4 weeks. But I'm just curious as to how much longer or how far you go with it before the league says, now we got to figure something out. I will say it looks very much like baseball, where they say, we're going to play. We are damned and determined we're going to play. And it's just like the game with the Patriots and the Chiefs was postponed from a Sunday to a Monday, and the steps they've taken basically is test constantly anybody that was anywhere near Cam Newton until right up to kickoff. And so, they're determined they're going to play, but it's going to affect some ball games. You don't have your starting quarterback. That's a big deal. And, you don't need to give the Chiefs any more advantage than they already have.
Right, that's a huge break for the Chiefs. Because I thought the Patriots were one team that could possibly give the Chiefs some trouble because Belichick, coaches good defense, and Cam, the way he's playing, it's a different kind of offense. So, I thought at least the Chiefs had a challenge. Now I would assume the Chiefs will win this one pretty handily.
All right, let's switch gears and talk a little college football. The misery continues in Austin and College Station. I don't know who ought to be on a hotter seat right now. I did hear on a college football podcast at one time, 3 national writers, well-respected writers, asking if Ed Orgeron might be the next Gene Chizik. Chizik won a national championship with Cam Newton at Auburn. The following year, they go 8-5. The following year, I think they win 2 ball games and he gets fired. I would argue that Jimbo Fisher is the next Gene Chizik, because what has he done since he won the national championship with a freshman quarterback in Jameis Winston? He left the Florida State program in tatters, got snookered the Aggies out of $75 million, guaranteed, no buyout, and they got housed by Alabama again Saturday. It's hardly ever competitive. And where's the improvement? What are they getting in College Station that they haven't already had, which is a mediocre football team that's going to finish 4th in the SEC West every year?
Right. And I guess my thing is he is underperforming based on the money he's making. But I feel like maybe what the expectations are in College Station compared to what they actually should be are like way different because –
well, they're always been delusional.
Let's be honest here. A&M was never even dominant in the Big 12. So I don't know what we actually thought when they're going into the toughest division in college football, and then all of a sudden they're going to be competing with Bama and LSU and even Auburn. They're none of those programs. They might want to be. They might think they are. They're not. They haven't done anything of significance. I'm trying to think. Even in the Big 12. They upset K-State in the 98 Big 12 championship game, and outside of that, I don't know what they ever did. So
R.C. Slocum was the coach. The only year they had it that was a significant year was Manziel's freshman year when they won 10 ball games under Summer, and he won the Heisman. And that's been it.
And I think that actually, thinking about it, I think that probably made everyone's expectations go up way higher than they should have been, because that was like a one-year flash in the pan. That was just a special. Manziel had an incredible year and everything went right. They won at Bama. But I would argue, Brian, the coach that I think should be on the hot seat is Tom Herman.
No doubt. I think they both ought to be.
Because A&M, at least you can say A&M is losing to they haven't lost a game this year against a team I thought they were going to beat. Texas continues to be this big tease every year. We have them ranked. They were top 10 going on into this weekend, and they lose to Gary Patterson again. I think Patterson's like 7-2 against them.
7-2 since he's come back to the Big 12.
And Joel Klatt had brought up the point about this past week about to be a premier program, you have to win your state. And Texas can't even beat TCU. So, Tom Herman came in there very arrogant, and look, he had done some good things, but really he had one great year at Houston. And then his last year at Houston, they lost some games that they were heavy favorites. So, he comes to Texas. I think everyone thinks he's the guy, and they have not gotten better. They have a good senior quarterback this year.
I will say I'm Sam Ehlinger is a real deal.
No, he is.
But nobody else on that team. Nobody else on that team plays up to the level that he does.
Yeah, so Texas is not – I mean, look, I never take Texas seriously because I feel like every year it's the same thing. I know that they're going to end up having a game just like that. The funny thing in all this, Brian, is it's with Oklahoma losing again, it's very possible that neither Texas or Oklahoma will even be in the Big 12 championship game because they play each other this week. So if, for example, if Texas would beat OU, OU's done because they're at 3 losses. If OU beats Texas, they're both at 2 losses.
They're done. They're both done.
They're done too. So
listen, the other problem there, and I said this last week, and I'm even stronger on it now, there's no way a Big 12 team gets in the playoff this year, because if Texas and Oklahoma are down, then you tell me who wins the conference and can point at their schedule and say they've got a quality win.
And I'm not saying this is going to happen, I'm just saying the only way I could possibly see a Big 12 team getting in is if Oklahoma State goes undefeated and runs the table.
But who's the quality win in that if Texas and Oklahoma are down?
But it comes to the end. I don't know who's going to be eligible for the playoffs, and It's going to come to if they're undefeated in one of the Power 5 leagues. I think they at least have a shot. I think we've both thought it's a good chance there's going to be 2 SEC teams.
There may be 3.
And then Clemson, if they run the table, they should get in. But there's still going to be another spot. So I don't know what's going to happen. Will Ohio State be able to get in? I do think Oklahoma State would be the one wild card. Again, don't think this will happen. Yeah. But if they run the table, if Oklahoma rights the ship, plays better the rest of the season, then, maybe. But again, right now the Big 12, the commissioner is just, has to be just totally crushed. We're 2 weeks in, 3 weeks into the conference season, and his 2, named programs are in crisis and pretty much out of it.
Well, and the only team that's been able to be representative on a national stage since the playoff began has been Oklahoma, and they just lost their 2nd game in a row for the first time since 1960. They have not lost 2 games in a row in the regular season, and so they're out of the top 25 now for the first time in 21 years. But what I'll tell you is that team is like LSU right now. They're young. That quarterbacks are freshmen. Those kids, people don't want to hear that in Oklahoma, but it happens. You get babies, and those kids, that youth shows, and it showed this past weekend against an Iowa State team that lost to Louisiana, but is still supposed to be a pretty good football team with a really good coach. So, it's going to be very interesting to see who responds and how both teams come out when Texas and Oklahoma play in the shootout, come up on Saturday in an empty Cotton Bowl or a semi-empty Cotton Bowl. That's going to be really weird. No fair, a 50% stadium. It's going to be bizarre. But I'm just really interested to see who bounces back and who can get it together. A couple of other things just real quickly. The legend of Mike Leach lasted 1 week in the SEC. Not only does he beat LSU, the defending national champion, and they are riding, boy, they're throwing parades nationwide for Mike Leach, and then they go out and lose to Arkansas, who snapped a 20-game SEC losing streak. Arkansas.
That, I'm not sure I've seen a more you want to talk about, and again, I know LSU is not the same team, but you want to talk about winning in Baton Rouge, lighting them up, setting passing records, and following it up, losing to the worst program in the SEC, at least right now. I mean, I don't know how to even explain that. I guess they were just throwing parades way too early because and that just shows you, I love college football because anything can happen. But that was
what I think happened was that LSU gave everybody in the SEC tape to show people what not to do defensively against Mississippi State. And I think Mississippi State for the rest of the year is going to see 3-man lines and people drop back 8 in coverage playing zone. And they're never going to have a pass more than 5 yards downfield for the rest of the year. That's just what I think. So anyway, it was a wild weekend. We've got, a huge weekend coming up because not only do you have Oklahoma, Texas, and, whoever loses that ball game is definitely eliminated. But you also, you're talking about A&M again, A&M at home against number 4 Florida. Okay, so the misery of the SEC just keeps on coming. And if you think it's one thing to lose to Alabama in Tuscaloosa. You think it's going to get loud in College Station if they don't show that they can compete against Florida next week? That's going to be really – and Florida's really good. They are really good.
Yeah, and Florida may actually be a playoff team themselves the way they've started their offense is loaded. So – but, yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. I actually saw on the Aggie message boards, there were people already saying, let's go back to the Big 12. And it's like, well, when you look at that schedule, because that's the thing, Brian, when they already you have to play Auburn, LSU, and Alabama. But then when you're also from the East having to play Florida this year, that's a tough one.
Listen, it's life in the SEC. I've been watching it my whole life, and it's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure. All right, you mentioned it, and we'll get to it real quickly. I have had very little interest in the NBA Finals since the Mavericks got knocked out, but Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat are actually giving the Lakers a series. And Jimmy Butler, for those who are watching this podcast, we are based in Tyler, Texas, and Jimmy Butler was a star at Tyler Junior College. So it's kind of like watching a hometown kid. It's like watching Patrick Mahomes light it up in the NFL. Butler was a great JC player here in East Texas, and he's been the heart and soul of the Miami Heat, leading them last night in Game 3, a triple-double, and he closes with 8 points in the final 4 minutes of the game to beat the Lakers, 115-104.
And it was a historic performance. He's only the third guy ever with a 40-point triple-double in the NBA Finals. LeBron and Jerry West.
Wow.
That's amazing company to think about. Everyone, and, credit to the Heat for the run that they've made. But, in the offseason when all these big free agent moves were made, I don't think anyone really thought much of the Heat signing Jimmy Butler. But
he's been the glue.
I mean, he's the kind of guy that you hate playing against because he plays defense, Brian.
Yeah. Whoa. Mind blown.
He plays defense and he has an offensive game, and it has come together for them. And it looks Philadelphia made a huge mistake letting him go and keeping the other guys. Yeah. So, but yeah, pretty cool to see a guy that played at Wagstaff here in Tyler on the biggest stage and joining LeBron and Jerry West with, and basically kind of NBA Finals royalty. Pretty cool to see.
Okay. All right. Well, it's time to wrap it up. Any final thoughts before we cut you loose?
One thing I want to say real quick, and the fact that we didn't talk about it basically proves what I'm talking about here. Major League Baseball has done a horrendous job of marketing their playoffs. I didn't even know the playoffs had started last week. I hadn't seen anything on it. You have 16 teams that get in. Meanwhile, we're talking about everything else. So Major League Baseball has just continued to do a poor job in every way. So I'll leave on that.
Ditto. Got no argument with you on that one. All right. We want to thank everybody for watching, listening. We ask you to leave comments on the YouTube page. Share this with your friends. We're up to, 10 or 11 people watching on a regular basis.
It's going to be 20 before you know it.
It's incredible. Yeah. I mean, 15 is next. I mean, we're going to get there. So, Ryan, enjoyed it as always. So Ryan Peterson, Bryan Houston, Bryan and Ryan, or Ryan Bryan, whatever you want. But we'll post it first thing on Tuesday morning, and we'll see you next week.